it can accept and what it will not. And to Mark's point, which is quite interesting, there was a day when if you'd heard that, you'd have said you were crazy. But is it true in a sense that Winston Peters has brought something fairly unique to the coalition in that respect?
I think there's some things in there that I did hear somebody say before, he's ancient, but I'm going to ignore that as a sort of an ageist remark. I think one of the things about Winston is that he's not afraid to stick to his values. He does have a set of values. He does have a self-sufficient ego. He's consistent. He's grounded. Time has enabled him to be able to articulate really clearly middle ground New Zealand. And I think he does it and does it really well. The business community probably favours him a bit at the moment because when it came to the capital gains tax, he stood in there and fired his shot and had the balance of power and exercised it. So there's a bit of a favour there, but I do come back. He does have a self-sufficient ego, so he doesn't waver. Right. The good thing is he's consistent and grounded.
Okay, Auckland Chamber of Commerce's Michael Barrett. Thank you very much, Michael, for being on the panel this afternoon. It's 4 away from 5. I wanted to talk about this because there have been a few trends that have made a comeback in recent years, and we've been unsure why. The next hairdo fits into that category. And apparently the mullet is making a comeback in Upper Hutt. But there is
old hometown.
Yes, wow. And at least one barber is trying to put a stop to the spread of the dreadful mullet. Mullet hairstyle is making a comeback despite best efforts of a barber who's offering to change the do for free in a bid to stop the trend taking off. It appears, however, to be too little, too late, as most of his customers are requesting the short on top, long at the back style, and no one has taken up the offer to get rid of the mullet. So,
deeply upsetting. Stick a rusty fork in my eye at the sight of a mullet.
Are you not a fan?
It's disgusting. It looks like some kind of insect at the back of your head.
So you never knew Wallace and his mullet days?
I had a fro mullet, yes.
Oh, wow.
Did I what? That's right.
Well, I've never been in danger of having a mullet, but I did come from the hut. And I know mullets are very popular.
But look at the All Blacks. Can we blame them for that? Because a few of them are sporting the sporting mullet.
Well, Goodhue and Squire, yeah. But they had... but it's funny, isn't it? Because it's a real... Up here, when we look at it in Auckland, it's always, the Westies is sort of
That's
mullet
what
country.
I think, yeah.
There's some sort of judgment over it,
Absolutely.
If I had a full head of hair, which I'm not blessed with, I think I probably would have just grown a mullet just to annoy everyone,
I just want to know why it's coming back into trend, because it's nowhere to be seen on Instagram.
No.
Unless I'm not looking in the right places.
But on the catwalk, you've got the ironic mullets, don't you? In fashion. You've got the fashion mullets.
Do you?
So, well, you do. So you wouldn't go there.
I haven't seen it, and I'm pretty in tune with trends and what's coming up and all of that stuff.
Are you too good for people with mullets? Is that what you're saying, are you?
No.
First it's the ancients, now it's the mullet wearers.
I want to know where it's come from and why it's popular now.
There's a few texts about moustaches, Mark Sainsbury, but we'll leave that to another time, shall we? Hey, you've been fantastic. Thank you very much. Gornaz Basam Tabar and Mark Sainsbury on Thursday's panel. Thank you very much.
Great to be here, Wallace.
Right.
Thank you.
I'm Wallace Chapman. See you tomorrow from 3:45 sharp. Checkpoint next. Bye.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere ake nei. Police say they're looking for a man they describe as a sexual predator after 2 attacks on women in Auckland, including the daylight abduction of a teenager from a supermarket car park. Jetstar grounds itself. The budget airline's cutting its regional flights at the end of November. So how's the self-proclaimed champion of the provinces going to encourage competition to take off? The Education Minister calls for Canterbury University to investigate how the death of a student went unnoticed for weeks. Which Otago town has a growing pee problem, and the gloves are off in US politics. The Democrats call it an impeachment inquiry. Donald Trump reckons it's a witch hunt. RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata tēnei. A man wanted by police after a 17-year-old woman was abducted and sexually assaulted in Auckland is being described as dangerous. The teenager was forced into a vehicle in Mount Roskill's New World car park last Friday afternoon. The police say she then was driven to Roseman Avenue in Mount Roskill and sexually assaulted before she broke free and found help. Detective Inspector Scott Barrett says the police are looking for 62-year-old Murray Edward Thomas Robertson.
We're treating the crimes as extremely serious and Murray Robertson as dangerous. We need the public's help to locate where he is, and we want anyone who knows where he is to ring 111.
Detective Inspector Scott Barrett says Murray Robertson was last seen at a service station in Tauranga on Monday. The police believe a similar incident that happened in Blockhouse Bay on Sunday could be connected. The convicted paedophile at the centre of the scandal engulfing the Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse in Care has admitted attending meetings of the Survivors Advisory Group, but the man says he was only there to support his partner, who was a member of the group, and they didn't socialise with the other survivors, Anusha Bradley reports.
The advisory group member says she has no intention of resigning following the revelations about her partner's sex offending. The man says he didn't attend meetings per se because he was only in the room to support her. He says he did have contact with some of the other survivors and talked to them, but he and his partner ate at separate tables during mealtimes. He declined to comment on whether it was appropriate for him to have had contact with the group given his sex offending. This is Anusha Bradley.
The Prime Minister has implored world leaders to watch their words online in a speech which was the polar opposite to that delivered by the US President Donald Trump. Jacinda Ardern was allocated a speaking slot on the first day of the United Nations General Assembly in New York. Our Deputy Political Editor Craig McCulloch was there.
Ms Ardern told the Assembly New Zealand has become known for the March 15 terror attack, but also for the thousands who responded with compassion and empathy. She said acts of violence and hateful and racist words are felt globally due to today's increasingly online world. As such, she asked leaders to accept their words had immeasurable consequences and to speak as if a small child was listening. Ms Ardern talked about the need for global cooperation to tackle world problems, a direct contrast with Mr Trump's America First rhetoric and nationalist agenda. He told the UN overnight that the future belonged to the patriots, not the globalists. From New York, Craig McCulloch.
The Regional Economic Development Minister says he's worried that if Jetstar drops its regional flights, Air New Zealand will inflate its prices. The airline today announced it planned to pull out of up to 130 regional flights by the end of next month. It is to cut flights between Auckland, Nelson, Napier, New Plymouth and Palmerston North, and between Wellington and Nelson. Shane Jones says he's extremely disappointed for those regions.
My deep fear is that Air New Zealand will begin to gouge. At the end of the day, Air New Zealand have to make their own price decisions, but they won't get a free pass.
Shane Jones says as the champion of the regions, he will talk to Air New Zealand if necessary. Health officials say there are signs of a levelling off in the rapid rise of measles cases nationally over the past 3 weeks. They also say that the number of measles cases may be falling in Auckland. Here's our health correspondent Karen Brown.
There have been 1,474 confirmed cases of measles since January, 83% of which have been in Auckland. But the latest weekly surveillance report from ESR shows a drop in cases to 133 in the last week, from 172 the previous week. There were also 33 fewer cases in the Auckland region in the latest week, with a 35% decrease in hard-hit South Auckland. The Health Ministry says weekly notifications of measles may have plateaued over the past 3 weeks and may be decreasing in Auckland. It adds, however, it's not yet possible to determine if the outbreak in Auckland has peaked, and further data is needed to confirm the trend. Ko Karen Brownaho.
The Education Minister is calling for an investigation after a person was found dead after several weeks at a student hostel in Christchurch.
A student was found dead on Monday at the privately run Sonodar village opposite the University of Canterbury. Education Minister Chris Hipkins says he wants the university to conduct a full investigation into the death. Mr Hipkins says he will also look at the rules and legal requirements around operating a halls of residence.
No student should be left for that period of time unattended, uncared for when they're living in a hall of residence or a hostel. There's a duty of care that goes with operating a hall of residence or a hostel, and clearly they haven't lived up to that in this situation.
Education Minister Chris Hipkins. One person is being taken to Christchurch Hospital following an armed defenders squad call-out near a Christchurch school this afternoon. Cordons were put up near Bamford School in Woolston, and the police were called to a self-harm incident at a nearby address. A St John spokesperson says the person being taken to Christchurch Hospital has moderate injuries. It's 5:05. In sport, Fiji are banking on the depth of their squad for their second Rugby World Cup match in Japan tonight. Coach John McKee has made 12 changes to the starting lineup after their 39-21 loss to Australia for tonight's match against Uruguay in Kaimashi.
Those new players coming in, it's important that they show leadership, firstly, to get a good performance against Uruguay, and secondly, those players have really got to put their hand up for selection, in the next match against Georgia.
The match is due to kick off in 10 minutes. Meanwhile, Samoa number 8, Awhai Setiti-Amosa, has been ruled out of the Rugby World Cup with a knee injury. Patrick Bevan's endeavouring to become the first New Zealander to win an elite men's medal at the World Road Cycling Championships in England tonight. Bevan expects to better his 8th place finish in last year's individual time trial, buoyed by finishing second on a stage of the Vuelta España earlier this month.
No one's got the answers for sport. That's why it makes it so compelling. It's why we do it. But for me personally, to be in the position I'm in, I'm just really excited to line up and then basically find out how good I am in this field.
The men's time trial is due to start just after midnight. The New Zealand women's basketball team has been beaten 67-44 by China in its opening game at the Asia Cup in India. They play Australia in their next game. That's the news.
Sticky fingers over Manuka honey.
The Aussies have grown fat on our pavlova cake. We are not allowing them to filch the wealth associated with Manuka.
Boris Johnson in a tricky situation.
I think what we've seen today is probably the biggest constitutional mic drop in 50 years.
And the messy Warriors get a new owner.
It's not a popularity contest and tough decisions need to be made. If you want to be popular, give everyone an ice cream. They'll all like you.
Cleaning up. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 a.m. on 101 FM, on air and online.
Then on 9 to noon, are the 1 in 5 children who struggle with learning being let down by classroom teachers who are ill-equipped themselves? And after 10, Sarah Foster-Sproul, the Kiwi choreographer whose work has the wow factor. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay mainly fine, but showers about the ranges may briefly spread elsewhere tonight. Wairatapa, Wellington, also Nelson. Few showers developing this afternoon and evening, mainly in Wairatapa, with possible thunderstorms there overnight. Clearing and becoming fine tomorrow morning. For the remainder of the North Island, showers, some heavy with hail and possible thunderstorms. Snow lowering to 600 metres over the central high country tonight. Showers easing tomorrow. For Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago excluding Clutha, showers, some heavy with hail and possible thunderstorms tonight. Snow lowering to 300 metres, but possibly 100 metres in Canterbury. Showers clearing from Canterbury for a time tomorrow morning. For Westland, Buller, Fiordland, Southland and Clutha, showers, some heavy with hail and possible thunderstorms, clearing in Westland for a time tonight and tomorrow morning. Snow lowering to 100 metres in the south tonight. Chatham Islands, occasional showers. RNZ National, it's just after 9 minutes past 5.
Thank you, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. We begin tonight in Auckland, where police are searching for a man they describe as a sexual predator, following 2 separate attacks over the weekend. In the first, a 17-year-old woman was abducted from the New World supermarket car park in Mount Roskill last Friday afternoon. She was dragged into a van, driven away and sexually assaulted. In the second incident, a 29-year-old was dragged into a van from a street in Mount Roskill on Sunday night and sexually assaulted. Police say the man they are looking for is dangerous and they have named him as 62-year-old Murray Edward Thomas Robertson. I spoke with Detective Inspector Scott Baird a short time ago and asked him to tell me what happened.
So what we know is on Friday afternoon, between 3:30 and 4:30, the 17-year-old victim was in a Newark car park. She was approached by who we believe the offender is, Murray Robertson. She was dragged into the vehicle and driven to another location. In the vehicle at the time, there was someone who was in the backseat who held her, and she didn't get to see this person. But she was then driven to another location where she was sexually violated. She managed to escape at this other location and was screaming, and a couple of members of the public actually saw her, helped her, and contacted the police.
So, when she was approached by this man that you think is Murray Robertson, did he speak to her? Did he try to coax her to the car?
What we understand is that he has had a conversation with her, and she has been dragged to the car. She has been near to the car anyway, but she's been dragged into the car.
So the other person in the vehicle is a male?
We believe so. We don't know for 100% sure, but as a result of having a complaint received this morning about a similar incident that occurred 2 days later in Blockhouse Bay, we believe it possibly was another male.
So the incident in Blockhouse Bay, it was two males, was it?
Yes.
Okay. So the male that's in the vehicle, when you say, well, the male you think was in the vehicle, when you say this person held on to her, what do you mean?
Look, I can't go into specific detail. Obviously, we need to keep some of that information to ourselves at this stage. But, you know, she was held on to by one person, and was sexually violated by another.
Okay. So they take her in the vehicle to where?
To an area, Roseman Ave, which is in Mount Roskill.
How would you describe that area?
It's a suburban area, houses. I understand where they were was towards a no-exit area on the street.
And that is where the sexual assault has happened?
That's where the sexual assault occurred.
And she's managed to get out of the car. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I'm not going to go into the specific detail. You know, what we know is she's got out, she screamed, some member of the public have heard her, seen her, helped her, and then contacted the police.
So obviously this all started to unfold in, a busy supermarket car park, mid-afternoon. It's after school. There are a lot of shops around there. Has anyone seen this?
Look, that's one of the things we're appealing to. If there's any members of the public who saw anything they thought was suspicious or saw this occur, they might have thought there was nothing in it. But if they've seen this, contact us. It's all part of our investigation.
Do you have the incident on CCTV?
I'm not going to go into the specific details, but what we can say is we have a photo of the vehicle and we have also the a CCTV footage of Murray Robertson.
Okay, so that incident was reported on the day it happened, yes?
Yes, Friday night.
The incident in Blockhouse Bay, tell us a bit about that. Where did it happen? Was it in a house, a car park, where?
Once again, a woman walking on the street, and the victim was 29 years old, and the car pulled up, spoke to her, grabbed her, dragged her into the vehicle, and drove her to Kinross Street in Blockhouse Bay, where she was sexually violated.
This man that you're looking for, Murray Robertson, how would you describe him in terms of, how dangerous is he?
He is dangerous. He's very dangerous. To have, as I say, the two incidents appear to be linked. We can't establish that, on 100% at this stage, but the proximity in terms of the area, the proximity in terms of the time, the method of the offending will indicate that it's possibly the same offender as the Friday. So we're treating them as two offences committed by the same offenders.
When did you become aware of the Sunday attack?
This morning. A complaint was made to the police this morning.
So, do you know this guy? Does he have form, Murray Robertson?
So I'm not going to go into the details of Murray Robertson, except to say that from what we know, he is dangerous. He is obviously a sexual predator, and we need to get him. And we need the public to help us get him.
There are news reports of a Murray Edward Thomas Robertson who has previously been found guilty of rape, sexual violation and detaining women. Is this the same man?
All I can say is, in terms of the investigation that we have currently running, and that's the abduction and sexual violation, and possibly a second one 2 days later, we are looking for Murray Robertson.
Do you have on your hands here two people, predators, who are going around searching for women? Two incidents in relatively quick succession. How concerned are you that they are looking for their next victim?
Look, what we know is that Murray Robertson was last seen at a service station in Tauranga on Monday. So we know he's mobile. We know he has links to South Auckland and to the Bay of Plenty. What we want is anybody who knows him or sees him or sees the vehicle to contact police immediately. They can call 111. If people want to call Crime Stoppers or call their local police station, we need to find him and we need the public to help us find him.
But are you worried that's what's happening here? He is on a spree.
So until we can positively link the two offences, we need to find him.
At the garage, where was that in Tauranga?
I can't actually tell you. I just know it was in Tauranga, a service station in Tauranga.
Was there a second person with him then?
We are making inquiries around that time that he was seen in Tauranga. So I can't tell you at the moment.
At this stage, do you have any ideas or clues to the identity of the second person?
No, we don't.
Can you give us any information about potential age or description?
No, I'm not going to go into the detail at this stage. Obviously, the second victim contacted us today. We are, obviously putting some support around our victims, and we haven't got the full story as to what actually happened on Sunday.
There is potential if this man is driving around. He could be listening to his radio now. So what is your message to Murray Robertson?
Murray Robertson, if you are listening to this, go into the nearest police station and give yourself up. We don't want to have to be a big manhunt here. You can make this easier for yourself by either contacting the police or coming in and giving yourself up.
And that was Detective Inspector Scott Baird. The police do need your help here. So Robertson was driving a silver grey Mazda MPV van, and the registration is HTW761. I'll give you that licence plate again. HTW761, and it's a silver grey Mazda MPV van. They are still looking through CCTV footage from the New World car park, and anyone with information can call Crime Stoppers on 0800 55 111. So that number again, 0800 55 111. Now, photos of Robertson and the vehicle he is driving are on our Checkpoint Facebook page. You can see them there. Jetstar has announced it will axe all regional flights from December the 1st. The budget airline is citing high fuel costs and a softened market for ongoing losses on the turboprop routes, which currently operate 130 flights a week. But it insists its jet services to the main centres, providing more than 80% of its revenue, are here to stay. Alex Perrottet and cameraman Nick Monroe filed this report.
Jetstar's cheap flights to the regions, no more. Passengers flying between Auckland and Nelson, Napier, New Plymouth and Palmerston North, as well as between Wellington and Nelson, have been told today their cheap seat option runs out on November 30. Why? Because it wasn't cheap for Jetstar.
Given the quantum of losses, and this business lost approximately $20 million last year, and with the potential that there's no real prospect of a material improvement in that in the medium to long term, we've had to make this decision, which we're disappointed about.
CEO Gareth Evans says those who've booked Jetstar to the regions from December onwards will be reimbursed, and Air New Zealand will offer them some special rates. But he says he's disappointed it had to happen so close to Christmas.
Every business needs to make a return, ultimately. We saw an opportunity, we wanted to take that opportunity. It's not played out the way that we would hoped. We're disappointed, and that's why we've made the call today.
Jetstar has been running the regional routes for 4 years and says last year 25% of regional customers paid less than $50 for their flight and 75% paid under $100. But those loyal customers at Auckland's domestic terminal today could be feeling the pinch come Christmas.
Yeah, it's a bit sad, eh? It was really good having a second option to fly on, and the staff at New Plymouth, Jetstar staff, are just phenomenal. So I really miss them if it happens.
A bit bummed actually, because it was quite convenient for us. Not always the best way to get around the country was Air New Zealand. So and Jetstar's been quite good for the budget constraints for the company. So and we also have a friend who's a pilot actually for Jetstar and does the turboprop flight. So he didn't actually say anything. So maybe it'd be a surprise for him too.
Shareholding Minister responsible for Air New Zealand, Grant Robertson, says he expects Air New Zealand prices to remain fair and reasonable, and says he won't be speaking to the national carrier about the near monopoly it now has.
New Zealand obviously continues to offer those services right around the country, and clearly there's an expectation from New Zealanders that there are fair prices paid, and clearly, we'll keep an eye on that, but those decisions are theirs to make.
He says he hopes a new competitor can come on board.
I think it is a shame to see that competition decline on those routes, and I hope that another provider will emerge.
Gareth Evans says all 70 affected pilots and cabin crew will be offered jobs either with Qantas or Jetstar, meaning 20 of them will have to take a job in Australia.
With the opportunity for staff to have alternative employment options, we're talking to them about that and helping them plan what their futures might be beyond the 30th of November. And as I've just gone through, we are making sure there's very, very flexible travel options available for customers.
There are third-party grounds crew operating in the regions whose futures are not so secure. In Auckland for Checkpoint, Alex Perrottet.
It's almost 23 after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let us know what you make of that. Will you be affected when those regional flights are canned? I'm wondering how many of you have booked well in advance as well, coming up to Christmas. The stop goes on those on the 1st of December. So let us know if you find yourself in a situation with no Christmas flights as well. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Jacinda Ardern has rebuked calls for fierce nationalism and has implored world leaders to instead work together. The Prime Minister's address to the UN General Assembly was in stark contrast to US President Donald Trump, who says the future belongs to patriots. Our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch, is in New York.
We may feel afraid, but as leaders we have the keys to create a sense of security and a sense of hope. We just need to choose.
A call for collaboration as the world turns inwards. Jacinda Ardern addressing leaders at the UN and echoing her message from last year, but now against a new backdrop.
The 15th of March 2019.
The Christchurch mosque shootings, which left 51 people dead and changed New Zealand forever. Ms Ardern recalled an encounter at a mosque just days after the attack.
Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a young boy gesture to me. He was shy, almost retreating towards a barrier, but he also had something he clearly wanted to say. I quickly crouched down next to him. He didn't say his name or even hello. He simply whispered, "Will I be safe now?"
She replied yes, but feared she alone couldn't guarantee it. And so today's appeal, to be careful with one's words online, to all country leaders, all listeners, including a certain president with a predilection for Twitter.
It is our turn to stop and to listen. to accept that our words and actions have immeasurable consequences, and to speak not only like the whole world is listening, but with the responsibility of someone who knows a small child somewhere might be listening too.
The Prime Minister's had 2 driving missions for this year's trip to the UNHQ, demonstrating real progress on the Christchurch call and urging quicker action on climate change. Both examples, she says, of global cooperation in action.
What if we change what us means? Instead of fierce nationalism or self-interest, we seek to form our tribes based on concepts that can and should be universal.
That message in stark contrast to Donald Trump's, the US president touting yet again an embrace of unbridled nationalism.
Wise leaders always put the good of their own people and their own country first. The future does not belong to globalists. The future belongs to patriots.
An explicit example of that independence, the United States' decision not to sign up to the Christchurch call, the commitment to eliminate violent and terrorist content online. In fact, Mr. Trump with a direct message for the major tech companies.
A free society cannot allow social media giants to silence the voices of the people.
The 2 leaders held official talks yesterday and described them as warm and wonderful. Today they were seated near each other at a UN luncheon. But while they may have been at the same table, Ms Ardern and Mr Trump, in terms of policy, are clearly on different planets. From New York for Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
And staying in the US, President Donald Trump has described moves to impeach him as the most destructive witch hunt of all time. And he's pledging to release the transcript of a phone call that's at the centre of the brewing political storm. Mr. Trump's faced threats of impeachment before, but till now, the Democrats have taken a cautious approach. But the House of Representatives is forging ahead with a formal inquiry after a whistleblower alleged that President Trump pressured the president of Ukraine to dig dirt on Democratic rival Joe Biden and Biden's son. CNN's Whitney Wild explains why the gloves are suddenly off.
For so long, Nancy Pelosi had said she did not want to move forward with impeachment. She was opposed to it. She didn't think the American public was there. That is backed up by a poll that was taken in August that showed nearly 6 in 10 Americans said they did not want to move forward with impeachment. However, in her statement today, it was clear that perhaps what she saw between surrounding this whistleblower allegation, surrounding the president's own admission that he brought up Joe Biden and Hunter Biden in a call with a foreign leader, that was improper. So on its face, she was outraged by that call. However, there has been growing pressure to bring forth an impeachment or consider it very seriously at the very least. Today, the number of House Democrats saying on the record that they support impeachment just skyrocketed all day long.
So the other bow that's being drawn around this conversation with the Ukraine president is Joe Biden and his son come up in this conversation, and then separate or connected, depending on which way you look at it, the president withholds military aid from the Ukraine, yes?
Right. So basically the information that we have been reporting is that prior to this call, the president had directed his chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, who is also the head of the Office of Management and Budget, to withhold about $400 million in military aid. Then following that was this call. So while the president says there was not an explicit quid pro quo there, House Democrats say even if there wasn't a quid pro quo, the timing is suspect and they need to know more. And at a minimum, they feel that his even bringing up a political adversary was improper.
This has a long way to run. So really, is it going to go the distance?
That remains to be seen. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has indicated she would like to see a swift resolution to this. The head of the Intelligence Committee for the House, Jerry Nadler, is a Democratic representative out of New York. He said he wants to wrap this all up by the end of the year. But there are a lot of steps to take before that happens. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi did not lay out specific details about what she sees as happening moving forward. She hasn't divvied up tasks for the separate committees to move forward forward. All she has said is that the 6 committees who have already initiated an impeachment investigation can move forward under this umbrella of an impeachment inquiry. Again, you said that there's a long way to go, and that's absolutely true. The House needs a simple majority to have considered the president impeached. Then, after that, it has to go on to the Senate, where there needs to be a 2/3 majority for the president to be removed. That is so unlikely, given that it's a Republican-controlled Senate.
So, have you been looking at the president's Twitter account? What's he saying?
As you would expect, he's tweeted quite a bit. Really what he's saying, and this has been echoed by other members of the Republican Party today, is that he feels like the Democrats are usurping the news cycle now in order to promote an agenda that they already had. So several members of the GOP today had said that this was a parade toward impeachment that was just searching for a rationale, and that, in fact, Democrats are not putting the will of the people first, but are instead putting politics first. The president tweeted today that so much work was being done, so much success being had at the United Nations, but instead the Democrats took over the news cycle, and he lamented that fact.
He's called it a witch hunt, hasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a phrase he uses quite often. He has often deflected these the Russia inquiry as well and other allegations of wrongdoing as a witch hunt, as entirely politically motivated, at one point calling it a politically motivated cheap shot.
So he could actually shut this down really quickly, because he has indicated that he's prepared to release the full transcript of the phone call.
Right. So the administration saying today that they plan to, as you said, plan to release the transcript of the phone call. They also said that they plan to bring forth the whistleblower complaint to Congress. However, what is important to remember is that while this is the tipping point, the actual impeachment inquiry does not center only on this whistleblower allegation. In fact, there are 6 committees that range from judiciary to intelligence, foreign affairs, financial services, that are all looking into President Trump's past dealings and several aspects of his presidency. So, again, while this is perhaps served as the tipping point for this impeachment inquiry, it is not the only element being investigated.
And that's the CNN's Whitney Wild reporting there. Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, bonuses and junkets are off for banking and insurance staff who sell policies their customers don't need. And the Education Minister calls for an investigation after the death of a Canterbury University student went unnoticed, apparently 4 weeks. We would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program, but I'm just wondering, how well do you know your neighbours? When would you go looking if someone didn't turn up at work? A couple of weeks? 4 weeks? 2 months? Let us know your thoughts. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time to go to Susanna with the 5:30-ish headlines.
The police are describing a man wanted after a 17-year-old woman was abducted and sexually assaulted in Auckland as a dangerous sexual predator. Detectives are urgently seeking 62-year-old Murray Edward Thomas Robertson, who was last seen at a service station in Tauranga on Monday. The teenager was forced into a vehicle in Mount Roskill's New World car park on Friday, then driven to Roseman Avenue, where she was sexually assaulted. The police say it may be linked to a second attack on Sunday evening in Blockhouse Bay. The paedophile at the centre of the scandal over the inquiry into abuse and care has admitted being at meetings of the Survivors Advisory Group. But he says he was only there to support his partner, who belongs to the group, and they didn't socialise with the others. Air New Zealand's Chief Revenue Officer says it won't increase pricing on regional Jetstar routes until the end of 2020. Jetstar has announced its plan to pull out of up to 130 regional flights by the end of next month. Air New Zealand says it will offer affected Jetstar customers $50 flights on the same route and day if possible. The Education Minister is calling for an investigation after a Canterbury University student was found dead at a hall of residence, reportedly after several weeks. The university says the student's body was found on Monday at the privately run Sonodar Village student accommodation. Chris Hipkin says he will look at the rules and legal requirements for operating halls of residence, saying a duty of care goes with such operations. A person who travelled on a plane from the Gold Coast to Auckland has been diagnosed with measles. The health authorities are urging anyone on Virgin Australia flight VA113, which arrived in Auckland from Coolangatta at 5:15 on Saturday afternoon, to be on the alert for symptoms of measles. The person is believed to have contracted measles in Auckland before going to Australia, but was only contagious on the return journey. It comes as health officials say there are signs that the number of measles cases may be falling in Auckland. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. And joining me in the studio is Nona Peltier with Business News. Hi, Nona. ACC, they've got a deficit, a big one. Define big.
Oh, well, $8.7 billion big. That's pretty big. And that's partly because of falling interest rates. And actually, as a result of that, the future costs that they need, the money they need to service future claims and so on, has ballooned up to $11 billion, which was partly offset by a $5 billion gain in their investments, but not enough to put forward that deficit. Now, in effect, it's an accounting number as opposed to a real number because they only realize that in the future. So they still have about, $570 million in cash to pay off for claims and so on. But they had more claims than usual, too, in the past year. They had, a record 2 million claims. So a lot more accidents, I guess. And
they didn't identify which fields.
I'm just looking. I don't see anything that says scooters in here. I'm not sure. No, it wasn't specified, but it's a higher number. So in the near term, they can make all of their commitments and claims and so on. But in the longer term, they're going to have to look at whether or not claims the levies need to go up. That would be a political decision. Certainly, they don't want to move too soon. But we did hear from the Reserve Bank today. Interest rates are at the official cash rate is at 1%. It's likely to stay there or even go lower. There's certainly not much of an upside risk to interest rates at the moment. So we can expect that just like everybody else who saves or counts on their investments, when interest rates fall, so does your income. Here's a perfect example.
Yeah, that and pensioners. Now, the warehouse at the other end of the spectrum, they've posted a big profit.
Yeah, so we've been talking about the warehouse for a while. They have had some difficult years. They have a new chief executive. He's been in the job for about, 2 or 3 years now, Nick Grayston, and he brought some ideas from North America on how to, jumpstart some of their business. Quite aggressive with everyday pricing rather than discounting sales and that sort of stuff. That's been successful, obviously. So they made a net profit of $65.4 million in the year to July, and that compares with $22.9 million the year before. So that's 3 times more than they made. Yeah, so it's made
a massive jump.
Major, yeah. So obviously they're pretty chuffed with themselves, and hopefully, I guess they're hoping that things will carry on. It's a big upgrade for them, but remembering that they had some write-downs, they've had a lot of restructuring, so it's come at a cost, but look, I'm sure that they're very pleased with that result.
And they didn't tell you what we're all snatching up for that money?
Hey, bargains. It's got to be bargains, right?
That's what they would say, yes.
The share price rose 6% as a result of this result. That was a rise of 14 cents to $2.45, which is remarkable because today, overall, our index only moved 3 points up. That's not very much. That's not even like a percent, to 10,861. And after the OCR, our dollar announcement from the Reserve Bank that it was staying the same, ticked up a little bit, not a lot, but look, we're at 63.2 US cents, 93.2 Australian, and 50.7 British pence.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier with our business news there. The convicted paedophile at the centre of the scandal engulfing the Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse in Care has admitted being in the room at meetings held by Survivors Advisory Group. It emerged yesterday that the partner and support person of one of the Commission's Survivors Advisory Group members is a convicted paedophile. The Internal Affairs Minister, Tracy Martin, held an urgent meeting this afternoon with commissioners investigating historical abuse in care over the revelations. Anusha Bradley reports.
There are calls for the commissioners to resign following revelations the sex offender, who is a partner of a member of the advisory group, was involved in their meetings. The paedophile's partner, who RNZ can't name for legal reasons, says she has no intention of resigning. Some of the group members say they've been re-traumatised after learning of the man's convictions. RNZ spoke to the man today and asked him whether he attended any meetings. His answers have been voiced up.
I didn't attend them. I was there to support my partner in the room. I didn't attend any of the meetings per se.
When asked if it was appropriate for him to have contact with survivors during informal gatherings, he declined to comment. The man says he talked to some of the survivors at those gatherings, but says his contact was limited and he did not join them for meals.
I was not sitting with them. Me and my partner were sitting at a table away from them.
He says he told the Commission 2 weeks ago about his sex offences, but they were told months earlier that he had to notify the police when he travelled, though they never asked him why. A meeting of the Survivors Advisory Group in Christchurch today was cancelled by the Commission. Panel member Tyrone Marks says they were only told when they turned up for the meeting this morning.
This is a quote from what they said today, is that because certain members of the panel have gone to the media and said these things that and indicated that it has re-traumatised, the events have re-traumatised other members, then where the Commission have said to close the meeting.
Tyrone Marks says he's angry this happened because the group hasn't had a chance to get down to work yet.
To me, that's just an excuse, and it's kind of like a punishment thing because we've done that, and so everyone's not happy about it.
Tyrone Marks says the entire commission needs to be replaced so survivors can have trust in the inquiry. For Checkpoint, Anusha Bradley.
And the commissioners wouldn't comment as they left the meeting a short time ago. That's the meeting with the minister, but said a statement was expected to be issued shortly. Insurance brokers and bankers can kiss goodbye to junkets and bonuses as the government moves to ban sales-based incentives. The Commerce and Consumer Affairs Minister, Chris Farfoy, announced stricter controls on banks and insurers today in the wake of scathing reviews by the Reserve Bank and the Financial Markets Authority. The financial services sector and the National Party are broadly supportive of the changes, but say the devil will be in the detail. Here's our political reporter, Joe Moyer.
The government is calling time on banking and insurance staff being incentivised with overseas trips in exchange for selling policies their customers don't need. Mr Farfoy says junkets or bonuses lead sales staff to pressure customers into buying unsuitable products, such as policies they can never claim on.
The days of the trips to Rome are gone. If you sell 10 policies, and that practice needed to be long gone many years ago.
The Insurance Council of New Zealand Chief Executive, Tim Grafton, says it's about time the playing field was levelled.
One of the challenges for the sector has been what we describe as first mover disadvantage. So the first company to withdraw that kind of incentive, say for an intermediary who's selling products on their behalf, might mean that their business is taken elsewhere. So applying the law to this and prohibiting that behaviour puts everybody on a level playing field and avoids that problem.
Mr Farfoy has already briefly met with the opposition Commerce and Consumer Affairs spokesperson, Brett Hudson, who is happy to work with the government on the recommendations. He warns, though, that other industries will continue to be free to carry on incentivise sales behaviour.
I would note that these sorts of offers exist in other industries, so for many years, tradespeople have operated under very similar incentives, and I believe still do.
Other new measures include stricter controls backed by stronger enforcement tools for the FMA to direct licensed institutions to change behaviour, improve their systems, as well as suspend or vary the conditions of a licence. Mr Farfoy says that puts the hard word on the banking and insurance sectors to clean up their act or risk being shut down.
But I think it's pretty inherent now on the banks, on the insurance sector and the wider finance sector now, that they've been given a message that if they don't clean up their act to make sure that they're working in the best interests of consumers and their customers, then their licence will be at stake.
While Mr Hudson says he can fundamentally see why there should be an increased level of scrutiny, it will come down to whether that scrutiny should have stopped at transparency or is right to go all the way to a ban. Mr Farfoy has described today's announcement as being immediate action to prevent and penalise poor conduct, rather than initiating a further inquiry into the sector, such as the Royal Commission some called for. Mr Hudson says the need for a Royal Commission has already been ruled out.
Well, I think in fairness, the regulators have determined that that's not a necessary step, but they've also determined that some additional scrutiny is required. And as I say, we'll go through the detail, but in general principle, there's not a lot, I think, that we would object to.
The Bankers Association, the Financial Services Council and Tower Insurance have all endorsed the ban on sales incentives based on volume or value targets. Mr Farfoy expects the new legislation to be introduced by the end of the year, followed by a select committee process and hopefully new law in place before the election next year. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jo Moyer.
The Education Minister is calling for an investigation after a Canterbury student was found dead, reportedly after up to 8 weeks at a university hall. The University of Canterbury says the student's body was found on Monday at the privately run Sonodar Village student accommodation. Our reporter Katie Todd is at Sonodar Village and she joins us now. Katie, what do we know about what's happened here?
Yes, as you said, the University of Canterbury and the police have confirmed that the body of a man was found at the Sonodar residence on Monday night. It's a hall residence with 108 bedrooms. It's privately run by the company Campus Living Villages, and it's situated away from the main university campus on what's called the Dovedale campus. Most of the people that live there are exchange students. Many are from Japan, but RNZ understands it's not an exchange student who was involved in this incident. Now, on the University of Canterbury website, it's described as a close-knit community. It consists of small apartments with around 5 bedrooms each and then shared living spaces, kitchens and bathrooms.
And what's been going on there today?
Well, up until this evening, it's been relatively quiet at the Sonodar Village. We were unable to approach beyond the car park outside. There were security officers checking for student IDs. There's been police officers here in undercover cars who we understand are investigating on behalf of the coroner, and they were due to wrap up their scene investigation today. But just in the past hour, there's been other carloads of officials arriving, and they've been led into the area by the Campus Living Village staff. And we understand there is a memorial service currently happening inside the village.
Okay, so the University of Canterbury and Campus Living Villages, which is obviously in control of the hostel there, what have they had to say about this?
Well, very little in the way of confirming how long the deceased student was not contacted for. We've been trying to get statements from them both today and recently heard back from both of them within the past 20 minutes or so. First of all, we'd asked Campus Living Villages about what level of care it provides to its students, and they responded with a statement saying they were deeply saddened by the incident. They said the family has requested privacy, so they won't be commenting on the specific circumstances, and they won't be doing any interviews. As for the university, they gave us a little bit of a longer statement, and they have confirmed they'll be conducting an independent investigation into what happened within Sonodar. And they told us that there's 2 residential advisors who are employed there, and twice a week those RAs, as they're called, are told to, they're meant to clean and check all the communal areas within the apartments. And there's also fortnightly meetings between staff at Sonodar and the university itself for any problems to be gone over.
Okay, so the Education Minister, Chris Hipkins, he's spoken out about this today. What's he saying?
Yes, so the response from the University of Canterbury came after the Education Minister called for the independent investigation into the incident. But he's also said he'll look at the regulatory and legal settings around operating a hall of residence in response to what's happened here.
Thanks, Katie. That is Katie Todd, who's at the Sonodar Village, which is where the body of that Canterbury University student was found on Monday. It is about 11 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. To the UK now, and MPs there are preparing to return to Westminster tonight amid a deepening political crisis that has thrown the future of Boris Johnson's Prime Ministership into turmoil. The UK's highest court, the Supreme Court, has found Mr Johnson acted unlawfully when he advised the Queen to approve a 5-week suspension of Parliament. Boris Johnson now stands accused of misleading the Queen, but he remains defiant. The ABC's Samantha Hawley reports from London.
Once again, the UK was thrown into uncharted waters.
The court is bound to conclude, therefore, that the decision to advise Her Majesty to prorogue Parliament was unlawful.
11 Supreme Court justices, including Lady Brenda Hale, unanimously agreed Boris Johnson had unlawfully tried to stop the Parliament from undertaking its duties.
The effect on the fundamentals of our democracy was extreme.
What wasn't directly mentioned in the 24-page judgment was that Boris Johnson had misled the Queen when he'd asked for her to approve the 5-week parliamentary suspension. Her Majesty's neutral role requires her to take the advice of the government in power, but that she's been dragged into an unedifying political scandal will not sit well with the palace or the public.
Boris Johnson, have you embarrassed the Queen? Have you embarrassed the Queen, Prime Minister? Have you apologised?
In New York, Boris Johnson delivered the expected: no apology, no regret.
Obviously, this is a verdict that we will respect, and we respect the judicial process. I have to say I strongly disagree with what the justices have found. I don't think that it's right.
Doubling down on his promise to deliver Brexit on time, with or without a deal, on October the 31st.
I do think there's a good case for getting on with a Queen's speech anyway, and we'll do that. But I think the most important thing is we get on and deliver Brexit on October the 31st.
Boris Johnson had argued he's suspended the Parliament to allow for a new legislative session. The court saw through it.
I welcome the judgment this morning.
And the outgoing Speaker of the House of Commons, John Bercow, immediately did what the court had ruled he could and recalled MPs back to Westminster.
I have instructed the House authorities to prepare, not for the recall, the prorogation was unlawful and is void, to prepare for the resumption of the business of the House of Commons.
Gina Miller, the businesswoman who brought the case to the English court, declared it a victory for democracy.
We are a nation governed by the rule of law. Laws that everyone, even the Prime Minister, is not above.
Behind the doors at number 10, there'll surely be a blame game underway. Some argue Dominic Cummings, the Prime Minister's chief advisor and the mastermind of the Vote Leave campaign, should take the fall. Under his counsel, Mr Johnson has suffered a string of embarrassing blows, including the Parliament voting against his call for an early election. Boris Johnson will arrive back in the UK for an almighty fight. The nation he leads has been thrown further into crisis.
Samantha Hawley in London. A Bay of Plenty hapu is accusing the Tauranga City Council of breaking its promise to gift or lease a significant piece of land back to it. Last year, the council agreed in principle that the land at 11 Mission Street was to be returned to the Otamatahi Trust, Taha Trust, and then perpetually leased to the Elms Foundation. But the decision was finally made yesterday that a separate entity be set up to administer the land, involving both the hapu and the foundation. Miriana Johnson reports.
After heated debates for over a month, councillors remain split as to whether land should go to the Otamataha Trust or the Elms Foundation. The Deputy Mayor, Calvin Clout, says the joint ownership proposal is a last-ditch solution.
So that is really, you might call, a compromise situation and a solution which I think at the end of the day possibly no one was actually particularly happy with.
A final decision won't be made until the new council has been formed, which Mr Clout says could mean the dispute drags on. He says he regrets how this has damaged the council's relationship with local hapu.
We did have an opportunity to make a real strong, positive, forward-looking move with this decision to gift to the Autamataha Trust. So that was my personal opinion. I do see this as a minor setback, but I'm still very confident that longer term we will continue to move forward together.
Autamataha Trust Chair, Puherake Ihaka, is extremely disappointed and says that council has broken its promise to give the land to hapu.
The relationship has definitely suffered. It's taken a backward step. We no longer have that faith and confidence and trust in them. Where to from here is, well, only time will tell in terms of our initial discussions with the new council when that takes place.
But the Mayor, Greg Brownless, who voted against giving the land to iwi, disagrees a promise was made to the hapu.
The indication all along since the land was purchased was that it would go to the Elms Foundation directly. Now, it doesn't mean that council doesn't work with the Autamataha Trust, for example, around the cargo shed area and Dive Crescent. But in this particular case, I also thought that it's better to have the Elms on one title, if you like.
Elms Foundation Trust Chair Ian Thomas supported the original proposal, which would have seen them lease the land from the hapu. Now it just wants the council out of the ongoing negotiations.
We would try and keep it as simple as possible. We don't want a lease situation that would leave it in the council's hands, and it's time for it to be removed from the council's hands given their ineptness to date in handling this issue.
Mr Thomas says he'd ideally like the foundation and the hapu to have equal shares in the land, although he has yet to discuss that with the foundation or the trust. Mr Ihaka also doesn't want council in the negotiations, but says it's too soon to discuss what the share of the land would be. The council will now work with both parties to design the entity which will share ownership. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Miriana Johnson tēnei.
Police in Clutha say they're dealing with a growing meth problem in the region as a health issue and aim to offer help to users rather than arresting them. The local council, police and social services have combined forces to tackle a growing drug problem in the area, with rangatahi also involved in coming up with solutions for dealing with it. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown reports.
Clutha District's issue with methamphetamine is not unique in New Zealand. The small South Otago catchment of 17,500 people has been caught off guard by the emergence of the drug in recent years. Local Mayor Brian Cadogan estimates there are 100 or more users in the area.
There seems to be no rhyme or reason in who it hits and who's affected. If you think that it's going to affect a certain demographic of society, you'll be wrong. It can hit anyone, anywhere, it seems. And in discussions with families that have been ripped apart by it, from people who have had suicides in their family, the thing that came back to us strongly was the support mechanisms just did not know it was there.
Senior Sergeant Stan Leishman says the Class A drug has also brought more gang activity, including standover tactics, to the district.
What we're seeing is it's growing. We have anecdotal evidence, and we keep coming upon situations where people are having their property taken from them through drug debt. There's been a couple of drug operations recently, and those drug operations clearly showed that the supply of methamphetamine was causing harm in our community.
But rather than hiding its problems away, Clutha District is being proactive and putting the needs of the addict at the front of their action.
We can go and knock on the doors of people who we know are addicts or meth users, and it's kind of what we call prevention by intervention. And pretty much what we're doing is we're saying, look, we know you're using meth. We'd like to refer you for treatment and give you that option. But if we do that, we've actually got to know that there's services out there that can cope.
Brian Cadogan says the council wants to solve the problem by tackling it head on.
We've taken the direction that we're going to confront it, we're going to openly acknowledge it, and we're going to try and do something to put the support around our communities and around the people that are directly affected so that we can at least help.
The founder of drug awareness group Amped for Life and reformed drug addict Pat Buckley visited the district last week to host community talks and visit high schools. He says local authorities are taking the right approach to curbing meth's grip on residents.
Nobody wants to air their dirty laundry and nobody wants to talk about their deep, dark secrets, but when it concerns our young people, our rangatahi and our communities, I think we actually have to have an honest conversation about the problem, and let's find some resources and some solutions and wraparound services to assist those people in need.
Mr Buckley's visit to Clutha District was organised by the Clutha Youth Council. Its chair, Ella Rose Lawrence, says she and other teenagers are not shying away from the issue.
It's real amazing to see, like, people that you thought wouldn't even do it, they're just like, oh, you let me try, and it's actually, as Pat told us, it's ruining people's lives.
Ella Rose Lawrence says she hopes to share Clutha's approach with other young people around the country. For Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
Let's get to some of your feedback now before the news on Jetstar axing its regional flights. John's got in touch to say the moment Jetstar started flying into Nelson, Air New Zealand dropped their fares. I wonder how long it will take them to raise their fares to previously high levels. Glenn says Jetstar pulling out means the regions get screwed even more. There's no doubt Air New Zealand will put up prices, he says, on routes where Air New Zealand don't have competition. The fares are always higher.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, ko Susana Leata tēnei. The police are describing a man wanted by the police after a 17-year-old woman was abducted and sexually assaulted in Auckland as dangerous and a sexual predator. The teenager was forced into a vehicle in Mount Roskell's New World car park last Friday afternoon. The police say she was then driven to Roseman Avenue and sexually assaulted before she broke free and found help. Detective Inspector Scott Baird told Checkpoint the police are looking for 62-year-old Murray Edward Thomas Robertson in relation to the attack.
From what we know, he is dangerous. He is obviously a sexual predator, and we need to get him. And we need the public to help us get him.
Scott Baird says the Mount Roskill attack could be linked to a similar one in Blockhouse Bay on Sunday. Murray Robertson was last seen on Monday at a service station in Tauranga. The Minister of Finance says it's a shame to lose airline competition in the regions, but the government won't tell Air New Zealand not to raise its prices. Jetstar is proposing to pull out of up to 130 regional flights across New Zealand at the end of next month. It plans to cut flights between Auckland, Nelson, Napier, New Plymouth and Palmerston North, and between Wellington and Nelson. Grant Robertson says it's up to Air New Zealand to decide whether it will boost its fares.
We've had times in the past in New Zealand where we haven't had other operators on those regional routes, and we'll have to see whether another one emerges, but those decisions are entirely for Air New Zealand to make. Clearly there's an expectation from New Zealanders that there are fair prices paid, and clearly we'll keep an eye on that.
Grant Robertson says he's hopeful another airline will emerge as competition. The convicted paedophile at the centre of the scandal engulfing the Commission of Inquiry into Abuse and Care has admitted attending meetings of the Survivors Advisory Group. But the man says he was only there to support his partner, who was a member of the group, and they didn't socialise with the others. The woman says she has no intention of resigning following the revelations about her partner's sex offending. The man says he didn't attend meetings per se because he was only in the room to support his partner. He says he did have contact with some survivors and talked to them, but he and his partner ate at a separate table during meal times. He declined to comment on whether it was appropriate for him to have had contact with the group, given his sex offending. The University of Canterbury is launching an independent investigation into the death of a student at a university hostel. There have been reports that the man, who has been identified by the university as a New Zealander, was dead for a number of weeks before being found on Monday. The university's Vice-Chancellor, Professor Cheryl de la Rey, says it will investigate how the situation could have occurred and what actions need to be taken. She says support has been put in place for students within the Sonodar residence where the body was found. Dr de la Rey says it is inconceivable this could have occurred given the comprehensive pastoral programs in place. The family of the deceased student has requested privacy. The British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is on his way home to London after Britain's Supreme Court ruled his decision to suspend Parliament unlawful. All three main opposition leaders and a number of MPs have called on him to resign. The BBC's James Lansdale says Mr Johnson is likely to struggle on despite the ruling until he can call an election.
I think there will be still voices within Number 10 who will say, look, if eventually an election is held, then they think that the events of the last few hours will help in their argument when it comes to saying, look, there's a decision here over Brexit, and either you're with the people and the views of the executive, the government, that is the view put forward by Boris Johnson, versus Parliament, and now they'll probably throw in the courts as well. So there are some in Downstreet who hope that that narrative can continue. The question is whether the Prime Minister can survive that.
James Lansdale in London. The first ever Māori to be appointed Chief District Court Judge says he is honoured to have the role. Judge Hemi Taumonu of Ngati Porou and Ngaitahu has been a judge since 2004. He developed and presided over the first rangatahi court in Gisborne in 2008 and encouraged fellow judges to set up marae-based youth courts. Chief Judge Taumonu says among his priorities is improving people's access to justice as well as receiving equitable treatment. He says he is humbled by the appointment.
It's also a great honour for really all of the iwi throughout the country, because it is the first time a Māori's ever been appointed as the Chief District Court Judge, and we are talking about the biggest court in Australasia as far as the District Court is concerned, so it's a massive honour.
Judge Hemi Taumonu will be formally sworn into his new role on Friday. It's 6:05. In sport, the Black Ferns Sevens team has shuffled its coaching staff. Alan Bunting and Corey Sweeney have been appointed co-coaches of the world champions through until next year's Tokyo Olympics. Bunting has been head coach since late 2016, while Sweeney has served as his assistant before taking over in a caretaker role this year. Stu Ross will continue in his role as assistant coach. New Zealand Rugby's high-performance Sevens manager Tony Philp says they believe the new setup is best for the coaches and the players.
Corey will look at come from a people and program point of view, and Alan will focus on the rugby and the culture, with Stu looking at set piece and the video analysis.
Tony Philp. The New Zealand cyclist Patrick Bevan has found the World Championship course for tonight's men's individual time trial to his liking. The national champion is targeting a medal in Yorkshire after finishing 8th in Austria last year. Bevan has ridden the 54-kilometre course several times since arriving in the UK.
New Zealanders could appreciate it with the road conditions and kind of the way the roads are up and down and left and right all day. It's not too dissimilar to racing a time trial in New Zealand, which is really nice.
Patrick Bevan. The New Zealand women's basketball team has been beaten 67-44 by China in its opening game at the Asia Cup in India. They play Australia in their next game. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, a celebration of asparagus. It's in season after all. We have a window on the culinary world of a Chinese-American chef, Ken Hom. Wonder if he uses asparagus. There's a chance to test your oral history skills in our midweek quiz and win a prize as well. And we find out why some British parents are encouraging their children to play in the street, although not necessarily in the traffic, on Nights from after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. For Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mainly fine. Showers about the ranges may briefly spread elsewhere tonight. For Wairarapa, Wellington, also Nelson, a few showers developing this evening, mainly in Wairarapa, with possible thunderstorms overnight. Clearing and becoming fine tomorrow morning. For the remainder of the North Island, showers, some heavy with hail, possible thunderstorms. Snow lowering to 600 metres over central high country tonight. Showers easing tomorrow. For Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago, excluding Clutha, showers, some heavy with hail and with possible thunderstorms tonight. Snow lowering to 300 metres, but possibly 100 metres in Canterbury. Showers clearing from Canterbury for a time tomorrow morning. For Westland, Buller, Fiordland, Southland and Clutha, showers, some heavy with hail and possible thunderstorms, clearing in Westland for a time tonight and tomorrow morning. Snow lowering to 100 metres in the south tonight. Chatham Islands, occasional showers. RNZ National, it's 6:08.
Thank you, Susanna. If you're just tuning in, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Self-appointed champion of the region, Shane Jones, says he'll ask the government to reconsider his idea of a contestable fund to help airlines breaking into the regions after Jetstar announced it's pulling the pin on unprofitable flights to small-town New Zealand. The airline's canning flights to Nelson, Napier, New Plymouth and Palmerston North from the 1st of December, saying it's lost millions on regional routes due to high fuel costs and softening demand. Regional Economic Development Minister Shane Jones says rumours of Jetstar's regional demise reached him last week, but no one approached him formally.
I don't feel that there's much that the government really could have done in the event that they never formally approached me for any assistance whatsoever.
Should they have? And would you have been able to help them?
Look, we endeavoured to create an aviation connectivity fund last year, and the system is that we had to get the officials to generate some options, and there was no appetite within officialdom to put Pūtea at risk, and there wasn't an appetite amongst my colleagues. They felt that now was not the time to stretch the Crown balance sheet into that area. I always felt, given that we bailed out Air New Zealand, we need to ensure that we've got a vibrant set of services in our regions. But hey, look, I put ideas up and occasionally they get harpooned and disappear like a balloon of air.
So who harpooned this idea?
Oh, well, I have to say that the Ministry of Transport were doubting Thomas's. They felt that this was a step too far for the Crown balance sheet. And there's 3 other ministers who are the provincial growth ministers, Grant Robertson, Phil Twyford and David Parker. And obviously things that I'm promoting don't always get accepted, and that's the name of the game. And
Were none of
I
them
accept that.
keen? Were none of them keen?
Well, they're very keen to ensure that the airports remain suitable, in a suitable state, but in terms of underwriting the costs of a competing airline, they were not happy with that prospect.
So what exactly were you proposing and how much would it have cost us?
Look, I can't remember how many tens of millions would have gone into the contestable fund. I had in mind other airlines. Who knows, a future government might bring that type of thinking back, because it's difficult to see when you've got such a dominant player such as Air New Zealand, and especially when it's pulling out of our smaller areas such as Kaitaia, Whanganui, parts of the Taipōtini West Coast and Whakatane, and I do worry as to whether or not the gap's going to be filled by tertiary players. So that was the thinking behind the concept of a contestable fund.
So they would have been able to apply for some kind of subsidy?
Yeah. In other countries, what you do is you underwrite part of the revenue until such time they're up and running. Why do you do it? You would do it because you want to ensure connectivity and you want to create some competitive pressure. I think Kiwis need to ensure that Air New Zealand doesn't massively increase the cost of travel. It is already expensive in a lot of our regional areas. They did bring some cheap fares down. They're not as widely available as you might think. So we need to ensure that this doesn't become an opportunity for gouging.
Okay, 2 things there. Do you need to revisit it? Because now you've just lost, the competition, haven't you, to the regions? So do you need to revisit a fund like the one you were talking about?
Yeah, so I'm going to take the issue up with the Senior Transport Minister, that's Mr Twyford. However, I have to be straight up with your listeners. The reality is when the idea was floated earlier in our reign, it did not find a body of support.
Do you think that attitude may have changed, given that we're now in a different situation, aren't we?
Well, the best I can do is take the issue up with Minister Twyford, and then such a matter would need to be discussed by the Finance Minister and a range of other ministers. Look, I think it's a legitimate issue. Whether or not the state needs to stretch that far, that's a moot point. I've got absolutely zero belief that the National Party would want to go into this space. But look, I'll raise it with the other ministers, but I'm not going to push it incessantly if they feel that it is not an appropriate response.
So, as champion of the regions, on your watch, connectivity to the regions just got a whole lot worse, didn't it?
Well, connectivity in New Plymouth, Rotorua, Napier, And Palmerston North has taken a blow today. And the difficulty that we have is this Aussie company is going to continue to operate in our large metropolitan areas, but for reasons that I'll leave up to them to explain, they've decided to shrink the size of their footprint, and I'm very, very disappointed about that.
Well, the reason is that they lost 20 million last year alone on those routes. They say petrol prices and a lack of demand mean that they can't even, cut even on these routes. So, well, have small town New Zealand let them down in some way by not, use it or lose it?
Well, I do know quite a few of the flights that go into New Plymouth and Gisborne. A lot of business travellers find them inconvenient. They feel that it causes them to stay there a day or a night longer than they might have. But hey, I'm a pro-industry politician, and I've always known that by and large, New Zealand, in terms of industry, is a market-orientated society. I gave it a good shot to create some sort of subsidy fund that people could dip into. I was unsuccessful, so it's unlikely we'll see that option on the table again before the next election.
So how do you keep Air New Zealand's prices in check? You've raised that as a concern, and now the competition on those regional routes is gone. How do you do that?
Well, obviously, if you find cases of egregious anti-competitive behaviour, then there's an avenue to the regulatory agencies. But I say to every listener, I say to every Kiwi listening, and you have a whole host of Kiwis that listen into you, I say that you've got to back those politicians who are willing to hold to account the big end of town, the corporate end of town. Look, I've got a reputation for it. I do suffer in terms of popularity. But for example, I was absolutely correct in terms of what I predicted about Simon Mutter and Spark. I told everyone that he had this vain dream that the All Blacks could be streamed via Spark. He buggered off, and there's a group of people left to pick up the pieces. So I know what these people are like.
Yeah, but how are you holding them to account? Because you've just said, basically, you've conceded that you got no control over the situation if Air New Zealand decides to hike its prices in the absence of competition. You're powerless, aren't you?
Well, the responsible minister is Grant Robertson, and in fairness to Grant, I often disagree with him, but he is the senior minister, and in his view...
But this is a fight you have taken on behalf of the regions that you have self-appointed champion. So you're powerless, aren't you?
No, I'm not resiling from the crown that's been put upon my square head, not at all. But what I'm pointing out to you this afternoon is that in the absence of a fund that enables other players to come into the space and continue to offer competitive pressure other than public vigilance, and if there are cases of gross and egregious behaviour, then whip them off to the Commerce Commission.
What's your message to Air New Zealand?
Well, Air New Zealand, you have great brand equity, but that brand belongs to New Zealanders. And it was the New Zealand public that bailed you out on the brink of insolvency. You have to honour your obligations, not only to the flash flights to Tokyo and the flights to Chicago, but maintain high quality connectivity to the regions. And if you start to slip on that, you're going to enjoy a copping. You're going to cop a lot of flack from my good self and possibly other players in the provinces. If it's egregious, they'll go down the regulatory route.
And that's Regional Economic Development Minister Shane Jones there. And Ian's got in contact to say Air New Zealand fare prices. I recently had to book a round trip, Wellington-Gisborne, and Ian says it was $650, followed by 3 exclamation marks. Auckland police are hunting for a man they describe as a sexual predator. They're appealing for witnesses after a 17-year-old woman was abducted from a supermarket car park, dragged into a van, driven away and sexually assaulted. Detective Inspector Scott Baird said police are looking for 62-year-old Murray Edward Thomas Robertson following the incident in the New World Mount Roskill car park at 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon. They say Robertson was accompanied by another man who held the teenager down in the van. They say there was a similar attack in the nearby suburb of Blockhouse Bay, where a 29-year-old woman was dragged off the street on Sunday night, and they're not ruling out the 2 attacks may be linked.
Auckland Police are looking for 62-year-old Murray Robertson in relation to an abduction and sexual violation of a 17-year-old victim in Mount Roskill last Friday. We've been making inquiries over the weekend and through the week to identify him, and then this morning we had a report of another abduction and sexual violation that occurred in Blockhouse Bay on Sunday night. We believe they are linked, but we have no strong evidence at this stage. We're treating the crimes as extremely serious and Murray Robertson as dangerous. We need the public's help to locate where he is, and we want anyone who knows where he is to ring 111 and let us know. Our inquiries established the last time he was seen was at a service station in Tauranga on Monday.
What is it about the two incidents that make you believe that they are linked?
The proximity between the Mount Roskill and Blockhouse Bay, the modus operandi of the offending in this matter, and it was just the proximity of the time as well.
How are the women involved in these incidents doing?
Well, the victim, we have a 17-year-old and a 29-year-old victims. We've got Auckland Sexual Assault Help are there with their counselling, the police are there supporting them, their families are supporting them. It's very traumatic for them though.
And that's Detective Inspector Barrett. He needs your help. He says that Robertson was driving a silver grey Mazda MPV van. Now, the registration is HTW761. The rego again, HTW761. It's a silver grey Mazda MPV van. Now, the police are continuing to look through CCTV footage from the New World car park, and they would like anyone who thinks they have seen this man or the vehicle to get in touch. You can call Crime Stoppers on 0800 55 111. So that's 0800 55 111. And photographs of Robertson and the vehicle he is driving are on our Checkpoint Facebook page. Someone's got in touch about that car park actually at the New World at Mount Roskill. They say they stopped using it even before this happened because they felt it was dodgy and they felt unsafe there. They say they go to a supermarket further away down the road, but they feel safer there. Thank you very much for your feedback. And staying with the police, they've just announced that Rangiora Police Station in Canterbury has been closed to staff and the public as a precaution to enable urgent seismic remedial work to be done to the building. The police say they commissioned a seismic assessment after concerns were raised about the building during recent refurbishment work. Rangiora Police staff are currently working from other locations, and the public are encouraged to go to the Kaiapoi station if they need to visit the police. And the police say the strengthening work will take place as soon as possible, and they hope the station will be reopened and occupied again by mid next week. It's almost 22 minutes after 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. US Democrats have opened a formal impeachment inquiry into President Donald Trump over allegations he sought help from a foreign power to smear a political rival. Mr. Trump's faced threats of impeachment before, but this time the Democrats have thrown caution to the wind after a whistleblower report which apparently details the president pressuring the Ukrainian leader to dig the dirt on Democratic rival Joe Biden. The BBC's North America editor John Sopel reports.
New York in September, when the leadership of the world converges on the UN to speak. But one conversation is causing Donald Trump extreme difficulty, and the heat's intensifying. In July, he phoned the newly elected Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and it's alleged Donald Trump demanded an investigation into his Democratic presidential rival Joe Biden and his son's business dealings in the country as the price for receiving US military aid. No dirt, no aid is the suggestion. The president denies wrongdoing, but his account of the call has changed continually as the questions have piled up.
I think it's ridiculous. It's a witch hunt. I'm leading in the polls. They have no idea how they stop me. The only way they can try is through impeachment. This has never happened to a president before. There's never been a thing like this before. It's nonsense. And when you see the call, when you see the readout of the call, which I assume you'll see at some point, you'll understand. That call was perfect.
Joe Biden is the Democratic Party frontrunner, is leading Donald Trump in the polls, and says the president this time has gone too far.
The president does not comply with such a request from the Congress.
he continues to obstruct Congress and flout the law, Donald Trump will leave Congress, in my view, no choice but to initiate impeachment. That would be a tragedy, but a tragedy of his own making.
With the pressure on, Donald Trump has said he'll declassify the phone call and release a full transcript. But too little, too late. It won't be enough to stop the Democrats pressing the nuclear button and pushing for impeachment.
The actions of the Trump presidency revealed the dishonorable fact of the president's betrayal of his oath of office, betrayal of our national security, and betrayal of the integrity of our elections. Therefore, today, I'm announcing the House of Representatives moving forward with an official impeachment inquiry.
It's hard to overstate the significance of this move by the Democrats, and one that the leadership have been very wary about. A ball has been set rolling with uncertain consequences. Democrats will hope this brings about the end of the Trump presidency. What they fear is that it will galvanise support for him and lead to his victory in 2020.
John Sopel in New York there. To Australia now, where more than 500 companies, community groups and not-for-profits have been asked to put themselves on the government's controversial Foreign Influence Transparency Register. The register was set up to allow government agencies to see the extent of foreign ownership and control across Australia. It's aimed fairly and squarely at China, which describes the move as part of a hysterical response to Chinese involvement in Australia. Now, all the major banks, big telecommunications companies, media organisations and dozens of multicultural associations and charities have received letters from the government. The ABC's Tom Iggulden reports.
In a small, fluoro-lit conference room in a nondescript building in inner Canberra, 3 academics from Chinese universities are holding court.
If there's a second Cold War, Australia will be the first sacrifice for this Cold War.
That's Wang Yiwei of China's Renmin University, one of the trio of scholars brought to Australia by the Chinese embassy. It's clearly a discussion aimed at changing the political conversation about China, and the presence of 4 members of the Chinese embassy underlines the Chinese government's close involvement in the event. It seems like exactly the kind of thing the government's Foreign Influence Transparency Register is meant to track. And indeed, the Australian Institute of International Affairs, which organised today's event, is among the 524 bodies the government wrote to about registering.
I strongly encourage you to consider whether the scheme applies to your current circumstances.
Bryce Wakefield is the Institute's Executive Director.
The result of that letter is that we will declare any foreign funds that we receive from a foreign principal.
But the scheme isn't only about funding. The letter asks about communications activities if
the activity is undertaken on behalf of a foreign principal and the purpose of the activity is for political or governmental influence.
But that's not Bryce Wakefield's understanding. He's declaring the Institute on the register not for today's event, but for a previous one partly paid for by the Japanese government.
You only have to declare funding from a foreign principal if that funding is not declared at the event itself.
He admits to some confusion about the scheme when he first saw the letter from the government.
And I had a long conversation with somebody from the Attorney General's office because we were very interested in this issue. And she said that really the Foreign Influence Transparency Scheme pertains to direct influence of federal politicians and federal politics. And that is not the case here.
And he says the Chinese scholars speaking at today's event were expressing their personal opinions.
They aligned pretty strongly with the government, and I think that's probably natural for an event that is being promoted by an embassy.
And that's Bryce Wakefield from the Australian Institute of International Affairs, ending that report from the ABC. To rugby now, the Barrett boys are the first trio of brothers to start a test for the All Blacks and the first to represent New Zealand at a Rugby World Cup. The history-making siblings are preparing for next Wednesday's pool clash with Canada. Our rugby reporter Joe Porter caught up with them in Beppu to try and get an insight into their relationship off the field and find out just how special it is to be playing together at a World Cup.
I never really thought we'd all be here in the backyard. It would be, you'd sort of joke and say, oh, he's got a kick to win it, the World Cup. Like, you'd create scenarios like that and, you know, you'd sort of joke and sort of pinch yourself that we're here right now, yeah.
Lock and middle brother Scott Barrett says it's a dream come true to be at the World Cup with older bro Bowden and younger bro Geordie. And Bowden says it's the most time they've been able to spend together in ages.
As siblings, as you grow older, I guess you go your own ways, but it's an awesome time for us to connect on tour all together and be living the dream that we all once had, is to play for the All Blacks, and no better place than a World Cup.
Though Bowden is yet to be roommates with his whānau, with All Blacks manager Darren Shand seemingly keen to keep them apart.
Shandy still hasn't put me with Scooter or Geordie as a roomie yet, but hopefully the day will come soon.
Though Scott isn't so sure Geordie or Bowden could handle his room.
He's really tidy. I'm probably a wee bit messy, just let it run, it's all go with the flow, but yeah, these two are probably prim and proper.
While all three are All Blacks, Bowden is arguably the face of the team, something Geordie is well aware of.
Yesterday we turned up at the airport and they're all screaming Bowden's name, and Scott and I are looking at each other thinking, what's going on?
While he might be the biggest star, Bowden still takes time to make sure his younger brothers don't fall foul of the All Blacks coaches.
When it comes to meetings and, checking if your buddy's there, naturally you'll check to see if your siblings are there too. So there's little things like that happen that I guess you're not always thinking about yourself, you're thinking about the other two as well, naturally as a big brother.
The trio will next be thinking about Canada as they seek to help the All Blacks to an unprecedented third straight World Cup crown. In Beppu, mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Joe Porter aho.
And a little bit of positive feedback before we head off for the evening. We were talking earlier about the Canterbury student whose body appears, it wasn't discovered for several weeks, it seems. This person's got in touch to say, I'm a mailman. I noticed the other day that an elderly man who lives alone hadn't cleared his mailbox for several days, had to deliver a parcel to one of his neighbours. So I expressed my concern and they checked in on him. He's okay now. Very glad I did mention my concern to the neighbour. Ka pai. We could do with a little bit more of that, I think. Don't forget, you can go online and check out our stories from today. Alex Perrottet and Nick Munro's piece on Jetstar and also the interview with the police.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Auckland police believe a man wanted for abducting and sexually assaulting a teenager in Mount Roskill on Friday could be linked to a similar attack in Blockhouse Bay. The Finance Minister says the government will keep an eye on Air New Zealand fares after Jetstar pulls out of the regions. The paedophile, who's admitted being at informal meetings of the survivors advising the abuse and care inquiry, says he was only there to support his partner. And Canterbury University is launching its own investigation into the death of a student at a hall of residence whose body reportedly lay undiscovered for weeks. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
I think probably like a lot of others, pretty disappointed that there's been yet another disruption to what hasn't been a smooth and easy ride to the inquiry so far.
Live with local, national and international stories.